Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. So today I'm going to talk about a few basic approaches to writing poetry. That is, using these basic approaches, you can get a lot of ideas for writing poetry. Because as a beginner in poetry writing, one of the most challenging things is to think of ideas to write poetry on. Now, of course, there are a lot of things surrounding us. We get inspired by a lot of things, events, happenings. But if you're new to poetry writing, then it is difficult to sort of get these ideas translate into a poem. You cannot immediately recall these ideas. So I'm going to give you 5 basic approaches, and these will act as starting points for you to get many ideas for writing poetry. So let's get started with today's tutorial. Number 1, autobiographical. Now, the autobiographical approach to writing poetry is a pretty conventional approach. It's a tried and tested one that has worked for many poets, and hopefully it will work for you. Now, what do we mean by autobiographical approach? It simply means that if you're confused as to what exactly write a poem on, just close your eyes and try to think about your own self. Try to concentrate on your journey as an individual, your personal experiences, your life journey, trials, tribulations, whatever thoughts are coming into your consciousness, just let them run. Do not control them, whether positive or negative. And you can even take down notes if you're in the habit of doing so. And in the process, material for poetry will automatically emerge. You could even think of specific incidents that have helped you develop as a person, that have perhaps emotionally enriched you, that have been useful in a personal journey. These could be life learning experiences like the loss of a loved one, a breakup, or positive and happy experiences also, like a job promotion, for example, or getting a scholarship to study somewhere, fulfillment of a dream project that had been pending for long, winning a prize in a competition. It could be anything that has been life-changing and that has changed the course of your life for better. As I said, the autobiographical approach is a very conventional approach, and it might or might not work for you, but chances are more that it will work, because a lot of people do like to write about things which have some direct reference point from either their own life or the lives and experiences of those who are near to them. Number 2, hobbies. Now, this is a slight extension of the autobiographical approach. Again, it's very simple. Just close your eyes and try to think of things that you like doing, things that you've perhaps wanted to do but have never had the time to do. It could be anything: sketching, dancing, singing, walking in the rain, painting, drinking coffee, eating Maggie, even talking to random people, strangers, collecting some weird things. So whatever it is that you like doing, whatever it is you classify as a hobby, no matter how weird or idiosyncratic it might sound to other people, just think about it, make a mental note of these things, and then you will definitely get some ideas for writing poetry. Now, as I said, that these are basic approaches which can act as sort of frameworks on how to develop ideas from these approaches and how to further sort of chisel these ideas. Again, it all depends on your imaginative framework, your creativity, and your personality as a poet. So you can have more fun with the hobbies approach. For example, let's say you like cricket. You could do some basic research on the history of cricket, how it developed as a popular sport in so many countries, and then try to capture all this through a poem. Let's say, for example, you like rock music or you like Sufi music. You could undertake some basic research on the history and development of these genres across the world, and then try and even take notes like you would for an article. But then the fun thing is that you would try to convert these notes into a poem, try to capture all this poetically. Now, of course, this is challenging, but then everybody loves a good challenge, especially a poet. So You can have a lot of fun with the hobbies approach, but this basic approach, the moment you think of things that you would like doing, would certainly furnish you with a lot of material for poetry. Number 3, inanimate objects. Now, this is again a slightly unconventional approach for writing poetry, but a lot of poets, famous poets, have written beautiful poems on inanimate objects. Who could perhaps forget Pablo Neruda's stunning odes to literally everything under the sun, right from onions, tomatoes, salt, wine, to something that you would think as silly and mundane as socks for that matter. So of course, and those odes of Pablo Neruda, in those odes, these commonplace objects of everyday existence sort of became almost metaphysical, and they transcended their immediate sort of commonplace nature and became magical, became mythical creatures through the imaginative consciousness of the poet. And they became sort of microcosms reflecting the wider socio-political, cultural realities of those times. Now, of course, as a poetry writing beginner, you might not seek out to go that far, but you could definitely think of some inanimate objects, anything that fascinates you, anything that you perhaps have an emotional bond with, and then write a poem devoted to that. It could be anything: a chair, a table, an old music system that you like, an old CD that you're attached to, that you like listening to again and again, your first bicycle, a particular set of clothes, shoes, a particular painting that haunts you, that you like looking at, your childhood cricket ball, bat. It could be anything that fascinates you or that you have an emotional bond with, and all you have to do is to think of that particular inanimate object and try and write a poem devoted to that object. Number 4, places. Now, this is again a very, very conventional topic for poetry writing, and a lot of us would think of places as rather a topic, but it is an approach, because it's not as simple as writing a poem on a particular place. A place could mean many things. It could be a concrete place where you've been to, where you've traveled, and then you produce travel poetry on that place. You love your city, you write poetry in your city, that kind of poetry. But it could also be places which you have never seen, but you would perhaps want to travel to those places. You could do research of those places you're fascinated by, world cities you've read about a lot on the internet, and even without going to these places, you write poetry on these places precisely because your poetic consciousness adds an imaginative dimension to these places, and you mix your local history with these places, and you're fascinated by these places. You could also make up places using your imagination, because as I said, imagination is the weapon for a poet. It's the most important weapon for writing poetry. So you could just maybe there exists an idealized place in your head which you want should be there in this world, but the world has yet not seen that place. The world will now see that place through your poem. So a place doesn't necessarily have to be some concrete place you've traveled to. And even if you're not well traveled, you just pretty much stay in a local city area, you have a typically, you might think that you have a typically uneventful life. Even then, there are these little places which have mythic importance, mythic significance in your consciousness, because maybe they're attached to childhood. They have a lot of value for you. Your local park, maybe where you take a walk every day. If you're religious, then your local church or temple, perhaps, where you like to pay a visit every other day. You have some sort of a spiritual bonding with this place. The school where you went to during childhood, and you still have fond memories of that school. Your local football ground, or if you're a dancer, the stadium, the place, the auditorium where you gave a lot of dance performances. Any place can have a lot of emotional value for you, a lot of emotional significance for you. So any place can become material for poetry. Number 5, nature. Of course, nature poetry is again a very common sort of approach for writing poetry, and it's something that a lot of us get intimidated by the idea of writing nature poetry, because the moment we think of nature, we think of some very hi-fi sounding poetry which has very intricate descriptions of beautiful places and sort of very sublime sounding poetry we think of when we think of nature poetry. But it doesn't have to be like that. It can be something very simple. Nature is anything that is your immediate environment. Is nature, can be nature. Your local park is nature. The garden on your terrace is nature. If you're living in an urban setting which has street animals, street dogs or cows, your symbiotic relationship with those street creatures is nature. Your love for animals is nature. So anything that organically connects you to the earth, any such experience, any such object, any such setting is nature. So in order to write nature poetry, you don't have to necessarily travel to exotic locations or it's not mandatory for you to have visited beautiful nature sort of places. Of course, the moment we hear the word nature poetry, what really comes to our mind is a very maverick sort of a figure with a lot of time on hand, a lot of leisure, and obviously a lot of money, walking through some exotic, beautiful woods and talking really intellectual stuff and writing some eloquent verse devoted to the beauties of nature. And this, of course, sounds funny and congruous in today's times when a lot of us as poets are struggling to earn a livelihood, and none of us have that kind of time to sort of do those sort of things, to have that kind of exposure. So even if you're living in a concrete urban setting, you could write about the conflict between nature and environment, the conflict between nature and human beings and development. You could explore your own relationship with nature, how you are positioned within nature, because no matter where you are living, nature endowed all of us with very basic sensations. The touch of rain on your skin, the touch of winter sun on your skin. These are some very few basic sensations that nature bestows you with, and you could very much write poetry on these sensations. That also qualifies as nature poetry. So these are the 5 basic approaches that I wanted to talk about for poetry writing today. And as I said, these are just basic frameworks, but whenever you get lost about and you can't figure out what subjects to write poetry on, then if you just remember these 5 words, these 5 basic approaches, then you will definitely get some sort of ideas for going ahead with your poetic journey, for writing poetry. And I hope you like the video and you sort of gain something out of it, and it will help you in your poetic journey somehow. And thank you so much for listening to me. Please do like the video and please do subscribe to my YouTube channel, and please don't forget to press the bell icon on the top right hand side corner so that you can get regular updates on forthcoming poetry tutorials. Thank you so much for listening again.